From the 2026 exam onwards, a narrative question in AQA English Language Paper 1 Question 5 will ask you to write just the opening of a story, not the entire thing. In today's video, I'll share my top 5 things to include in a story opening. Number 1, establish atmosphere. The first thing you want to do in narrative writing is to create a clear sense of atmosphere. You should ask yourself, what emotions do I want my reader to feel? For example, suspense, tension, fear, excitement, and crucially, this is not something you want to achieve through plot, not through certain things happening, but through description, vocabulary, figurative language, structure, all the writing skills you've been studying for Section A of the exam. At the top of the mark scheme is the typical feature that students have subtle and skillful shifts in atmosphere. So let's look at how to establish atmosphere and then how to shift it and to do that subtly. There is a huge difference between plot and atmosphere. Look at this example from The Lie Tree by Frances Hardinge. The boat moved with a relentless rhythm like someone chewing on a rotten tooth. The islands, just visible through the mist, also looked like teeth, Faith decided. Not fine, clean Dover teeth, but jaded, broken teeth, jutting crookedly amid the wash of the choppy grey sea. The mailboat chugged its dogged way through the waves, greasing the sky with smoke. So what is actually happening here in terms of plot? The character Faith is on a mailboat and the water is choppy. But what is the atmosphere? It's oppressive and disturbing. And how is that achieved? Not through plot, but through language. The simile describing the boat's rhythm as being like someone chewing on a rotten tooth is incredibly disturbing, especially for me with my fear of the dentist. Then there's the emotive language, particularly in the choice of adjectives the author uses. The rhythm is relentless. The islands are not just like teeth, but jaded, broken teeth. The sea is choppy, grey. And then look at the verb choices. The mailboat is greasing the sky with smoke. What a fantastic choice of verb with connotations of pollution and contamination. The boat is not just travelling, but actively spoiling the environment it's in, and this adds to the oppressive and unsettling atmosphere. It's a fantastic piece of writing, and in just one paragraph, Hardinge perfectly establishes atmosphere, not through plot, but description. So often students try to create atmosphere through plot. Something like Faith was on the boat, a huge wave came crashing over the side, drenching her from head to toe. She gripped the rail tightly as the boat lurched to one side, her heart pounding in fear. Lightning flashed and thunder rumbled in the distance. As she fell into the ocean, she saw a shark coming. She reached into her bag and pulled out a stick of dynamite. And this is now an over-the-top action movie. We don't need that. For one, when everything we write is plot, 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 we don't get to know anything about our characters or the setting. For the highest marks, we want to be subtle, and this example is anything but subtle. No, what we want is for something relatively small to happen, for example, Faith is on a boat, and to create atmosphere through our description. Let me show you with the Faith example how things can totally shift, not through changing the plot, but through changing the description. The boat moved with a rhythmic grace, like someone humming a calming tune. The islands, just visible through the mist, looked like pearls, Faith decided. Not the plain, simple Dover pearls, but radiant, unique pearls, shimmering harmoniously amid the dance of the gentle blue sea. The mailboat sailed its steady way through the waves, tracing the sky with wisps of silver. See what I've done here? I've completely transformed the atmosphere by changing the language choices while keeping the plot, the basic plot, the boat journey, exactly the same. The original paragraph presents an oppressive, unsettling mood, whilst this new version creates an atmosphere of calm and beauty. Once you've established an initial atmosphere, the key to making subtle and skillful shifts is through gradual changes in language rather than abrupt shifts in plot. Small tweaks in vocabulary, sentence length, and imagery can help to achieve this. For instance, shifting from the waves clawed at the boat to the waves lapped against the boat instantly alters the tone from hostile to gentle without changing what's actually happening. You might start with a tense, claustrophobic setting using short, sharp sentences and harsh emotive vocabulary, and then slowly introduce gentler language to create a sense of relief or hope. The most effective shifts in atmosphere aren't going to be abrupt, they're going to unfold, allowing the reader to feel that change rather than being told it's happening. Number 2, character. Your narrative piece should include at least one character, and the top of the mark scheme dictates that they should be convincing. How do we create convincing characters? Well, one thing that isn't convincing with character description is what we might call police report writing. Something like this: Tom was tall and thin, he had blue eyes and brown hair, he was wearing a turquoise t-shirt and a pair of black jeans. In his left hand he carried a green Adidas bag. We call this police report character description because it's a list of physical traits, as if someone saw this person rob a bank and is then describing them to the police. It contains a lot of physical details, but it doesn't give any depth to engage the reader's imagination. It informs us about the character in terms of what they look like, but it does nothing to make them interesting or engaging. No, you want the examiner to be able to visualize your character, but without being bored. And one way to do this is to choose one or two physical character traits that are important and help us in terms of where the story is going. Take a look at this character description taken from The Revenant. William H. Ashley slammed his tin cup on the crude slats of the table. The carefully groomed grey of his beard did not conceal the tight clench of his jaw. For its part, the clenched jaw seemed unlikely to contain another outburst, as Ashley found himself confronting again the one thing he despised above all else: waiting. Okay, so here the writer describes a couple of physical details about the character related solely to their beard, but somehow we can visualize them, and the writer describes something happening from which we can infer things about the character. What can we infer? Well, number 1, frustration. The act of slamming his tin cup on the table indicates that William might be experiencing intense emotions such as frustration or anger. Number 2, a sense of control. Despite these strong emotions, William maintains a well-groomed appearance, which suggests he values self-control and discipline. His carefully groomed beard indicates he takes pride in his appearance and may be detail-oriented. Age and experience is also shown. The presence of grey in his beard suggests he's no longer young and might have a significant amount of life experience, wisdom, or both. Physical tension is there. The tight clench of his jaw further emphasises the intensity of William's emotions. It's a physical sign of restraint as he's trying to control or suppress his feelings. And there's an interesting contrast of emotions and appearance. We have this juxtaposition between the sudden violence of slamming the cup and the meticulous grooming of his beard, which might suggest that whilst William has a controlled exterior, there are strong emotions bubbling beneath the surface. So we learn a lot about this character from a couple of details, and a good question to ask yourself is, what do I want my reader to learn about my character? What's important in terms of where the narrative's going? And remember, keep it in line with the atmosphere you're trying to create. Thirdly, setting. Top marked students want a detailed and convincing sense of setting in their narrative writing so the reader can clearly picture it in their mind. One approach is to start with a couple of broad details that establish the overall time and place, then zoom in on a few smaller focus details to bring the scene to life. Let's look at this opening from Charles Dickens's Bleak House, London. Michaelmas term lately over, and the Lord Chancellor sitting in Lincoln's Inn Hall. Implacable November weather, as much mud in the streets as if the waters had but newly retired from the face of the earth, and it would not be wonderful to meet a megalosaurus 40 feet long or so, waddling like an elephantine lizard up Holborn Hill. Smoke lowering down from chimney pots, making a soft black drizzle, with flakes of soot in it as big as full-grown snowflakes, gone into mourning, one might imagine, for the death of the sun. Dogs, undistinguishable in mire, horses scarcely better, splashed to their very blinkers. So what does Dickens do here? He begins with a couple of broad details that establish the time and place in the reader's mind so we can start to visualise the setting. It's London, it's November. Then he focuses in on a couple of specific details: smoke from the chimneys, flakes of soot, dogs and horses covered in mud. And this is the kind of thing we analyse in Paper 1 Question 3, isn't it? It's a cinematic structure like a movie, starting with a wide establishing shot, then zooming in on a couple of close-up images. Now, you might be sat there thinking, well, that's well and good, but I'm not Charles Dickens. I can't write like that. So let's try and apply that approach to a sample question taken from my practice papers book. Write the opening of a story based on this picture. Okay, so let's first think about the details on setting we might want to describe. There's a castle, the dark sky, the trees, the mist. And now let's think about the atmosphere that we want to create. Let's go for something tense and mysterious. And now let's get writing. I want to start with a couple of sentences that establish this is a castle surrounded by trees at night, but I want to do more than just list those details. I want to use figurative language like metaphor and personification to create that tense atmosphere. How about this? The castle sat under a bruised sky, its turrets silhouetted against the pale light of the moon. The surrounding trees stood guard all round, their skeletal branches swaying faintly in the whisper of the wind. A creeping mist crouched at the bottom of the hill, spreading its cold fingers across the uneven ground. Faint yellow light spilled from one solitary window, glowing softly against the oppressive gloom. So what have we got here? Rather than just being a dark sky, I've described it as bruised, that metaphor, because of course the sky isn't literally bruised, but I've used that word because of its connotations of danger and pain, and it helps to create that tense atmosphere. In fact, a lot of the atmosphere is created through the adjective choices, the words describing the nouns. We've got the sky is bruised, the light is pale, the branches are skeletal, the mist is creeping, the fingers are cold, the ground is uneven, and on it goes. But a word of warning here, don't give adjectives to every single noun, else it'll be overkill, but choose perhaps a handful that'll really develop the atmosphere you're aiming for. And of course, then there's the personification of the mist with cold fingers and the wind with its whisper. And none of this comes naturally. You need to actively practice this approach of describing setting using figurative language, because it's not something that you're just going to do off the top of your head. So in describing setting, I've started with a couple of broad details, then zoomed in on a few more, filling the whole thing with atmosphere, creating adjectives, metaphors, personification, and that kind of thing. And look how my final sentence zooms in on one window. That's going to lead nicely to the next paragraph where something happens. Just to say, we could rewrite this completely if we wanted to create a calm and inviting atmosphere. Remember, the picture's a starting off point, a jumping off point for your own creativity. We don't have to stick to exactly what's in the picture. We could rewrite our description of setting perhaps like this. I won't read through it, but I'll put it here on the screen. In this version, the adjectives are softer. There's no tension or danger, just a sense of quiet calm. The mist is no longer creeping and cold, but curled up like a cozy cat, and the light is warm and inviting. So whether you're aiming for tension, mystery, peace, or comfort, the key is to use your setting to help create the atmosphere with the careful choice of adjectives and figurative language. Next up is our inciting incident. Once you've established setting and character, it's time to think about your inciting incident. Now, in terms of whole text structure, an inciting incident is something that happens that introduces the central conflict or challenge that drives the narrative forward. My main advice is that it's not a huge thing. This isn't an action movie. Let me give you some examples from the literature text that you study to make that point. In Macbeth, the inciting incident is when Macbeth meets the witches and they give him their prophecies. In A Christmas Carol, the inciting incident is the visit of Marley's ghost. In Romeo and Juliet, the inciting incident is when Romeo and Juliet first meet at the Capulet Ball. So the inciting incident is not the big event in the story, it's the thing that happens that will ultimately lead to the big event or climax. And because you're writing the opening of a story, you're not going to get to the big event or climax. You're just writing the exposition, where we're introducing the characters and setting, and the inciting incident, the trigger or catalyst that would eventually lead to that climax. So if we go back to our sample question here, let's imagine our idea is that the protagonist notices the spooky mansion on the foggy hill, and we learn a bit about the protagonist, and the inciting incident could be that he sees the woman beckoning to him and decides to investigate. And that's it. Where the story goes from there, the strange things happening inside the mansion, the confrontation with the ghostly woman, whatever else, that's not going to be in your answer because you're writing the opening. Now, one word of caution here, this still needs to be an extended piece of writing. It's a 40-mark question. That's half the marks of the entire paper. We're advised to still spend about 45 minutes on this, and if we allow 5 minutes for planning and 5 for check-in at the end, that still leaves us with 35 minutes of writing. So yes, we're only writing the opening, but we need to do that in detail. So if our inciting incident in this example is seeing the woman beckoning to him, our opening might end when he reaches the front door of the house, ending on a cliffhanger. One of the main things we want to avoid when describing action is listing. Something like he walked up the hill, he was feeling anxious, he climbed over the gate, he slipped on the stones and picked himself up, feeling embarrassed. If we just list our plot like this, not only is it dull, it doesn't allow us to show our best writing skills, and it finishes very quickly. The key with plot is this idea of show me, don't tell me. Here's a quotation attributed to Chekhov: "Don't tell me the moon is shining, show me the glint of light on broken glass." And this is what show me, don't tell me is all about. Describe things happening. One simple way to do this is with character traits. Don't tell me the protagonist is anxious. Describe it through physical tells. What does it look like? Maybe trembling hands, sweat, shallow breathing, tense shoulders. Then we can describe that. Something like this. His hands trembled as he wiped them on his trousers, damp with sweat despite the chill of the air. His breath came quick and shallow, each inhale catching slightly in his throat. He continued slowly up the path, his shoulders tensed, as though bracing for an unseen blow. Now, rather than one sentence, I've got one paragraph, and the reader is engaged because rather than telling me what's happening, he's feeling anxious, I'm describing the character and the reader has to work it out. We can also describe action taking place. Rather than write Claire searched for her medication, describe it happening. Claire's eyes searched quickly, flitting around the room. It had to be here somewhere. Her heartbeat hammered away, the familiar signal from her body that time was running out. Beads of sweat rolled down her forehead as she overturned cushions and tore open empty cupboards. She reached for her bag but knew already what she would find inside. Nothing. She screamed a desperate scream. So when you're writing plot, you want to make sure you show, not tell. And as I explained when talking about atmosphere, you don't want too much to happen. You want to avoid a complex plot line and make your writing engaging through creating atmosphere. The next thing to think about is structure. A convincing sequence of events is another typical feature of a top marks answer. Just like with the extract that we analyse in Paper 1 Section A, you want to make deliberate structural choices for effect. There are lots of ways to do this. Let me go through a few examples. Number 1, a flashback or flash forward where we move to a past or future moment to reveal key information to build suspense and add depth to our characters or plot. For example, when our protagonist sees the woman beckoning to him and has to decide what to do, maybe we could have a flashback that might help us understand his uncertainty. Maybe he remembers a moment in his past when he made a choice he later regretted. Perhaps he once ignored a call for help and regrets it, or maybe he trusted someone who led him into danger. This flashback not only deepens our understanding of the character, but also gives an emotional weight to the current moment. If you've ever watched the TV show Lost, you'll know what I mean. Flashbacks to develop character, but also increase tension, because we want to know why a polar bear just walked out of the jungle on a tropical island, and we go back in time to Hurley working in a chicken shop. Now, here's an example of a flashback. I won't read it, but you can pause and do that. It's an example of a flashback we might include in our mansion story. Notice how it isn't just randomly placed, it serves a clear purpose at that exact moment, a hint at the traveller's fear. We aren't told exactly what happened after the scream, leaving the reader intrigued and wanting to know more. Another popular structural device is a circular or cyclical structure, ending our story opening where it began, or revisiting an idea, an image, or a line from the start. For example, opening our narrative with the storm raged outside the castle, but he didn't care, not yet, and ending it with, this time the storm raged inside him, and he cared too much. Zooming in and out, moving between a wide perspective and a close-up focus can create a cinematic effect and emphasize key details. We saw an example in the bleak house opening earlier. In our story, we might start with a wide shot of a stormy scene, then zoom into a character holding a photo in their trembling hands. Now remember, there are also a possible 16 marks available in this answer for technical accuracy. 16 of the 40 are available for spelling, punctuation and grammar. I go through lots more on that in my revision guide. So I've updated my English language guide. The third edition now covers this new exam question and the new exam format. It's available as a paperback on Amazon or an ebook at mrbruff.com. And right now you can get the ebook free of charge. If you buy my literature guide and my power and conflict poetry guide, you'll get the language guide free. Those ebooks are instant downloads. They're not physical products. They're PDF files that get sent to your email and you can open them on your computer, your phone, your iPad, whatever it is. I'll put a link in the description, but do look for the bundle at the bottom of the page at mrbruff.com if you want to download the 3 ebooks to get one of them for free. Now, have you found this video useful? If so, please do subscribe to the channel. More people that watch my channel are not subscribed than are subscribed. And if you've got this far, all I would ask you to do as a thank you is hit that subscribe button. Thanks for watching.